Ladies and gentlemen, the star of our show, Ireland's international comedian, the King of Blarney, Hal Roach.
This is going to be a great night. I just feel it's going to be a marvellous night tonight. Of course, I was born to be a comedian. When my father saw me for the first time, he said, "Is this a joke?" Write it down. I was born at home, and when my mother saw me, she was taken to the hospital. People laughed when I said I wanted to be a comedian, but they're not laughing now. Two fellas in a pub in Belfast talking, and one said to the other, he said, "What's new?" The other fella said, "There's good news and there's bad news." He said, "What's the bad news?" He said, "The bad news is that the English have landed on the moon." He said, "What's the good news?" He said, "All of them." Oh, dear God. Thank you. I come from Waterford City, where the lovely Crystal is made. There was 23 children in our family, and we always put my mother on a pedestal. We had to keep my father away from her. How many times since you arrived in Ireland have you been sitting in the lobby of a hotel or a restaurant? There's an empty chair like that beside you. You won't be sitting down there 2 minutes when somebody will walk up to you and say, "Is there anybody sitting there?" And you're worse than they are, because you look and you say, I don't think there's anybody sitting there. Now you talk like that, don't you? Did you ever stop your car in the country in Ireland and ask directions to some place? Did you ever do that? It's a study in itself. Now let me explain. We Irish are very warm, friendly people, and if somebody stops the car to ask us directions to some village, it makes us feel important. But if we don't know the directions to the place you're looking for, we haven't the heart to tell you. Then if you keep talking to us, we panic and we'll tell you anything to get rid of you. It happened myself down in County Cork. I was looking for a place called Clonakilty. I said to the farmer, I said, "Am I on the right road for Clonakilty?" He said, "You are, but you're going the wrong way." So I said, "Well, what will I do?" Well, he said, "If I were you, I wouldn't start from here at all." Suddenly there was a bus passing by, and he put up his hand and he stopped the bus. He obviously knew the driver, and he went over and started talking to him for 15 minutes, left me standing in the middle of the road. He came back to me and he said, "I've just been talking to him," he said, "and he doesn't know the way either. But he knows a man who does." We talk that way, honest to God. I met a fella from Galway. I said, "Is it true if you ask a man from Galway a question, he always answers you with another question?" He said, "Who told you that?" Casey went to Spain, by the way, for a holiday, and he got a fantastic suntan, and the day he got back to Dublin, he dropped dead. He did. And the wife laid him out in his best suit for the wake. And Mrs. Murphy came in next door and had a look at him. She said, "My God, he looks fantastic. He had a great tan." And the widow said, "Yes," she said, "the holiday did them the world of good." And she said, Mrs. Murphy said, "He looks so happy and serene." And the widow said, "Well, of course," she said, "he's happy because he died in his sleep, you see, and he doesn't know he's dead at all yet, you see." But she said, when he wakes up and finds out that he's dead, she said, the shock will kill him. Murphy went to Casey's pet shop. He said, "I want to buy a canary, but it has to be a wonderful singer." And Casey said, "I have just the thing. Just arrived. Fabulous." So he produced this canary and he began to sing beautifully. And of course, Flanagan was impressed. He said, "That's the one, I'll take that." But just then he noticed the canary had only one leg. So he said to Casey, "This canary has only one leg." And Casey said, "You want a singer or you want a dancer? What do you want?" This fella Murphy had 2 wooden legs and he had a fire in his house. They saved the house, but he was burned to the ground. He tried to claim from the insurance company. They told him he had the leg to stand. In America, you call it the welfare. In Ireland, it's the labour exchange. Same thing. Visualize the scene. The clerk is sitting behind the desk interviewing Murphy, who was applying for some assistance. Now, the clerk said, Mr. Murphy, tell me something about your assets. What visible means of support do you have at the moment? Are you enjoying? And Murphy said, I have 500,000 shares in the Texaco Oil Company doing well. I have 300,000 shares in Guinness's brewery, booming, and lots of stocks and bonds and all that sort of thing. And the clerk said, good. Do you have a house? And Murphy said, I have 4 houses, fully furnished and paid for on the outskirts of Dublin. And the clerk said, good. Have you got a car? And Murphy said, I have a new Mercedes-Benz outside the door. And the clerk said, you're joking. And Murphy said, well, you started it. Now for all the nuns here tonight. This story is for all the nuns here tonight. Now I want you to write this down, sister. It's a good one. We had very cold weather here last January. Very cold indeed. There's a little nun standing at the bus stop here in Dublin. And the poor woman is freezing. She's going blue with the cold. Suddenly, a very frail woman she was, and suddenly the little nun began to sway, and Murphy is standing beside her. And suddenly, God help us, the nun went into a kind of a weakness. She did, yes. And didn't she faint into Murphy's arms at the bus stop? Well, being a gentleman, of course, Murphy lifted her and carried her into the only place that was open, Hennessy's pub on the corner. And he brought her into the back of the pub. He said, now sit down now, sister, he said, and I'll get you a little drop of whiskey to revive you. Oh, she said, God bless you, she said, and will you get the bartender to put it in a paper cup? He said, I will. So he walked up to Hennessy, the bartender, and he said, will you give me a large whiskey and will you put it in a paper cup? And Hennessy said, my God, is that little nun in here again? The nun is nudging the good father here, by the way. It's not a sin to laugh at that, honest to God. You're lovely people. Sullivan went to his fiancée's house. I said to the father, I want to marry your daughter. And the father said, have you seen her mother? He said, I have, but I prefer to marry your daughter. I was up to see my mother's grave recently, God rest her soul. And I saw Flanagan lying over the grave, by the way, broken-hearted. And I hadn't seen him for years. I never saw a man cry and broken-hearted like him. I said, I'm sorry. I said, it was someone obviously very dear to you. Was it the wife? She said, no. And he kept talking to the grave. Why did you die? Why did you have to die? I was really upset for him. I said, it must have been someone who was very close to you, very dear to you. He said, it was. I said, who was it? He said, my wife's first husband. Why did you die? Why did you have to die? Why? Waterford is my hometown, my dear friends, and I don't mind telling you that when I was a child in Waterford, things were tough in Ireland in those days. We were very poor. My God, I remember it well. We were so poor, my mother couldn't afford to buy me a new suit, so she bought me a new cap and let me look out the window. She used to buy most of my clothes from the Army and Navy stores. I looked ridiculous going to school dressed as a Japanese admiral. My uncle lived with us. He's a character, by the way. He's very fond of a drink. He went to London some time ago and he drank so much we had to pay duty on him to get him back into the country. Oh, yes. Fantastic. Shanahan went into a hardware store in Donegal and he said to the assistant behind the counter, he said, I'd like some nails. And the assistant said, how long do you want them? He said, I'd like to keep them. The lovely Irish woman. Of course, you know, ladies and gentlemen, that wakes and funerals are occasions for merriment here in Ireland. Did you know that? It's true. I was at a funeral in Donegal with my old pal Casey, by the way. I was standing at the open graveside and just then a very old man walked up and stood beside us. And Casey said to him, how old are you? The old man said, I'm 98. And Casey said, my God, it's hardly worth your while going home. They got a new funeral home, by the way, in Dingle, County Kerry. The first one of its kind, a funeral home. And Murphy died and his wife sent his remains to the funeral home to look after him. And they did a great job on him. They gave him lovely red cheeks and lovely red lips and new hairstyle, lovely suit and silk shirt and tie, and he looked lovely. And herself went back to have a look at him after 2 days. My God, she said, he looks fantastic. She said, if I'd known he was going to look that well, I'd have had it done years ago. Oh, I wish I could be out there with you listening to this. Do you know, when somebody dies in the hills of County Kerry, the ritual of the wake hasn't changed for 1,000 years. Let me paint a little picture for you. In the little thatched cottage, they have the kitchen table, and they cover with a white sheet and a silk pillow, and they lay the remains out on the table, and all the neighbours come in to pay their last respects. Such a man lying on the table is Seamus O'Shaughnessy, passed on, deceased, gone over, demised, and he's stone dead as well. Suddenly 2 of the legs of the table caved in, and O'Shaughnessy slid onto the floor. And Muldoon said, my God, what are we going to do? And Murphy said, well, we'll have to level him up somehow. He said, we'll put his head on a chair, we'll put his feet on another chair, we'll push a chair in underneath him, lift him up, and level him out. Muldoon said, a good idea. Murphy said, leave it to me. Murphy looked at the people in the wake and he said, can we have 3 chairs for the corpse? And they all went, hip, hip, hooray! This fella O'Toole lived in County Kerry, here in Ireland, this lovely part of Ireland, and he had a cat. He loved this cat. And one day he said to his brother Mike, I'm up to Dublin for a few days on business and I want you to take care of the cat for me while I'm gone. And Mike said, I will. 3 days go by and he phoned home. He said to Mike, how is the cat? Mike said, the cat is dead. My God, he said, did you have to tell me like that? Mike said, what other way could I tell you that the cat is dead? Well, he said, you could have said anything. You could have broken the news gradually to me. You could have said the cat was up on the roof. Maybe up on the roof and the fire brigade was trying to get it down. You could have said that. The next time when I phoned, you could say that they got the cat, they were taking it down, but they let it fall. And it was badly injured when it hit the ground. The next time when I phoned, you could say the doctors tried every way to save the cat, but it was no good and the cat died. He said, had you told me that way, it wouldn't have been such a shock to me. He said, by the way, how was Mother? He said, well, she's up on the roof and... This fella, Doolin, was made mayor of a little town in Ireland, and all the dignitaries from the other little towns came to pay tribute to him, and they gave a party in his honour, and Doolin was delighted. And the Guinness was flowing, and I think Doolin had a drop too much to drink, because at midnight he suddenly heard music beginning to play, and he got an irresistible urge to dance. He saw this vision in red standing across the room, and he just sauntered over and said, "Will the lovely lady in red care to have this dance with me?" And the figure answered, "I must refuse, for many reasons. Firstly, I can't dance. Secondly, that is not dance music the band is playing. It is the national anthem. And thirdly, I am not your lovely lady in red. I am the Bishop of Galway." This fellow Murphy had a racehorse, the fastest racehorse in Ireland. Every race that he entered this horse for, it won every time. It was always 10 lengths ahead of all the other horses. But it had one problem. Every time the horse came up to the winning post, it would turn right, veer off that way and run away. And some other horse would come on and win. But this was a problem. So Murphy went to see Danaher, the vet, and he said to him, "This is terrible, I'm losing a fortune with this horse. Every time he gets near the winning post, he just turns away, goes right and runs off. And some other horse wins." And Danaher said, "I am familiar with that problem," he said, "and I have the solution for you. What you want to do is this," he said, "you get a little lump of lead and you put it in the horse's left ear." And Murphy said, "How do I do that?" And Doolin said, "With a gun." Oh, write it down for God's sake before you forget it. This fella Danaher went to Dublin for the first time, by the way, and he went to a wedding in Dublin, and he was in a taxi. And the taxi driver is a bit of a comedian, you see, like all taxi drivers are here in Ireland. And the taxi driver said to him, "Do you like riddles, conundrums?" He said, "I do." He said, "I do." And the taxi driver said, "Well, I'll tell you one now, and this is a good one. Listen, okay." Now, the taxi driver said this: "It isn't my sister, it isn't my brother, yet it's the child of my father and mother. Who is it?" And he said, "I don't know." And the taxi driver said, "It's me." He said, my God, isn't that fantastic? You must be delighted. The taxi driver said, I am, yes, it's me. So when he got back to County Kerry, by the way, where he came from, he thought he'd try this gag out, by the way, with Sullivan. And he said to Sullivan, do you like riddles, conundrums? And Sullivan said, I do. And he said, I have a good one for you now. Listen. It isn't me sister, it isn't me brother, yet it's the child of my father and mother. Who is it? He said, it's you. He said, it's not me, it's a taxi driver in Dublin. Here's a little story I like. Casey is the pilot and Flanagan is the co-pilot. And they take off from Dublin, you see, and they're gone about a half an hour and a few problems arise. And Casey said, I better get back and talk to the tower. So he said, is that the tower in Dublin? And the voice said, yes. And Casey said, Christmas. The tower said, what? He said, Christmas. The tower said, what? He said, New Year's Day. The tower said, what? New Year's Day, what? Halloween. The tower said, what? He said, Halloween. And just then Flanagan turned to Casey and said, I think the word you're looking for is Mayday. This fellow Murphy is the postman in the village, and one morning he goes up to Mrs. Kelly's cottage to deliver the mail, and she's standing outside the gate, and just then a vicious dog comes up and stands beside her. He said to her, does your dog bite? She said, no. He said, good. He walked in, the dog attacked him and bit him on the leg. He said, I thought you said your dog didn't bite. She said, that's not my dog. Write it down, yes. This fellow Flanagan is standing at the bus stop in the village, and an old lady walked up to him and said, can you see me across the street? He said, hold on and I'll go over and have a look. Here's a little picture. I like to paint pictures with words, by the way. In the little village in County Wicklow here in Ireland, in the valley, there's a little church, and the priest's house is beside the church. And one afternoon, the priest is in his study, and he's doing his sermon, writing his sermon for the following Sunday. Now, what he doesn't know is that the dam has broken and the river has overcut. The banks have broken in the dam, and the waters are cascading into the valley. Suddenly, the priest looked down, and he's up to his knees in water, the poor man. And of course he panicked and he dashed upstairs and opened the window of the first floor, and the water is now up to the first floor, and there's a boat going by with people in it. They said, Father, for God's sake, get in and save yourself. And the priest said, no. He said, the good Lord will save me from the flood tides. And the boat went away, and the waters kept rising, and the priest finished up sitting on the roof of the church. And the water is now up to the roof, and another boat going by with people in it. And they said to him, Father, for God's sake, get in and save yourself. The priest said, no. He said, the good Lord will look after me, don't worry. I have my faith in the great one above. And the boat went away. The waters kept rising. The priest is now sitting on the bell in the bell tower. And the waters are up to the bell tower. And another boat going by. They said, Father, it's your last chance. Get in and save yourself for God's sake. He said, no. The good Lord will look after me. Anyway, the waters engulfed the village. And the next thing is the priest is standing at the pearly gates of heaven. And St. Peter said, Father, what happened? The priest said, I don't know. I can't understand it. It never happened to me before. He said, the first time. Can't understand it. He said, why? He said, do you think the good Lord would forsake me? Why do you think the good Lord would not save me from the flood tides? And St. Peter said, well, we did send 3 boats, you know. I'll never forget up in Donegal, you see, which is a lovely county. The hospitality of the Irish is unbounding. And I stopped at this little, farmhouse for a drink. Now, they don't give you water. They'll either give you a bowl of buttermilk or a drop of the pochine. Have you ever had the Irish Mountain Dew, the pochine? Great for dandruff. Have you tried it? It would take the paint off the door. But the woman gave me a bowl of buttermilk and I was drinking it, and this little pig came up, was nibbling at my shoe. I said, my God, he's a very friendly little pig. She said, why wouldn't he be? You're drinking out of his bowl. I remember the little pig down there. That's a joke, of course. But anyway, talking about the pochine, do you know that it's a sin to make pochine in Ireland? It really is a sin. And this young curate, you see, came to the village for the first time and was hearing confessions the first day. And this fella said, Father, he said, I'm after making 8 gallons of pochine. And the young curate, you see, wasn't familiar with the penance in that parish for this particular offence. So he said, excuse me, and he went into the sacristan and the bishop was half asleep in the chair. And he said, Bishop, I have a fella out in the confessional and he's after making 8 gallons of potheen. What'll I give him? And the bishop said, give him £2 a gallon and not a penny more. Recently I was up in Mayo and there's a little newspaper shop beside Cong Castle and I went in there to get the newspaper and this woman recognised me from my television shows and she said, is that yourself? I said, it is. She says, it's me too. So I said, it's the two of us then. She said, it is. I said, I'm glad. She said, so am I. I thought it was somebody else. Well, this could go on forever. So I said, I'd like the newspaper. She said, yes. Would you like today's paper or yesterday's paper? I said, I'd like today's paper. Well, she said, you'll have to come back tomorrow. Oh, dear God, I'll have to lie down for a while. Did you ever ask somebody the directions in Ireland in your car, by the way? Isn't it fantastic? Isn't it fantastic? Recently, I was looking for Skibbereen, County Cork, and this is a classic. It's got to be a classic. I stopped this fella and I said, good day to you. He said, good day to yourself. I said, I'm looking for Skibbereen. He said, are you now? I said, I am. Well, he said, I'll tell you how to get there. I said, thank you. Now, he said, here's how you get to Skibbereen. Now, listen to this very carefully. Listen to the connotation of words here. He said, now, you'll take the telegraph poles with you for a mile. Just listen to this for a classic. Now, he said, after a mile, you'll drop the poles and turn left. Are you getting this all down now, madam? Write it all down now. I says, and when you turn left, you said, you'll come to a little village and you'll think you're in Skibbereen, but you're not. Now, he said, you'll pick up the telegraph poles again and you'll carry the poles with you for 2 miles. And he said, you'll drop the poles and turn right, and you'll come to a little village, and you'll think you're not in Skibbereen, but you are. Isn't that lovely? Beautiful. This fella Shanahan went to the doctor last week, and the doctor examined him, and after half an hour, he said to Shanahan, I can't find anything wrong with you. He said, I'll have to put it down to drink. And Shanahan said, that doesn't matter, I'll come back one day when you're sober. I'm just finishing a book about doctors at the moment, the medical profession men, the funny men, you know. There's a fella sitting beside me waiting to see the doctor, and he's wearing a corset. You know, I said, a corset, yes. I said, how long have you been wearing that? He said, ever since my wife found it in the car. Now, well, God forgive you for taking the wrong meaning out of that. The Father Murphy was here, he cleared the hall. I went to see the doctor some time ago. I lost my voice and I couldn't talk as well. And I couldn't talk as well. Yes, and I said, doctor, I can't talk. I've lost my voice. He said, now just get into that little room, he said, and get undressed. I'll be right in to examine you. But I said, doctor, it's my throat. He said, don't argue with me. Get in there and get your clothes off immediately. Well, you can't argue with the doctor. And I went into this little room and I got undressed. And there's a fella sitting beside me with nothing on but the radio. I said to him, this is ludicrous. I come here with a sore throat and I finish up with no clothes on. He said to me, you're lucky. I only came here to tune the piano. Up in Donegal one night late, I was trying to get a room for the night, you see, with my chest. But anyway, I have a bad chest. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was knocking at this boarding house in the hills of Donegal. And eventually the woman opened the top window and she called down to me. She said, what do you want? I said, can I stay here for the night? She said, yes. And with that, she slammed the window down and left me standing there. Everybody's explaining that to everybody else. Can I stay here for the night? Yes. A lot of people have been admiring this. Now, madam, you're a good judge of jewelry. That diamond I'm wearing, just take a look at that beautiful diamond ring. Isn't it lovely? The story behind that is very interesting. Concerns my mother-in-law. What a woman, drummed out of the Gestapo for cruelty. She's dead, gone now. At least I hope she's gone. You can't trust them. Before she died, she called me to her bedside. She said, Hal, during my lifetime, I have amassed a great amount of money. She said, and when I'm dead, in remembrance of me, I want you to get a nice stone. Look at that ring, isn't it beautiful? Beautiful job, diamond, lovely. It's a piece of glass, but it looks good. The only way you're sure of getting a drink when the pubs close in Ireland is find out who's dead and where they're holding the wake. And you're in for the night. This fella Hennessy went to the wake the other night and he said to the widow, I'm sorry for your trouble. He had a good few drinks, he had a quick look at the corpse, and he came back to the widow and he said, I don't think your husband is dead at all. He said, I just saw his eyelashes flickering and his lips moving. And the widow said, well, dead or alive, he goes out of here at 9 o'clock in the morning. This is a special little piece that gives me great joy and happiness to do. It's about a little girl. My own little girl, her name is Grania, and every time I do this little piece, I think about her. I'm sure that everybody here tonight that has a little girl will see her in these words, because children are the same all over the world, and it's simply called, What is a Little Girl? Little girls are the nicest things that happen to people. They're born with a little bit of angel shine about them. And even though sometimes it wears a little bit thin, there's always enough left to lasso and capture your heart. Even when she's sitting in the mud or crying temperamental tears or parading up and down the street in mother's best clothes, a little girl can be sweeter, badder, oftener than anyone else in the world. She can run around, stamp, make funny noises that frazzle your nerves. And yet when you open your mouth, she stands there demure with that special look in her eyes. A little girl is innocence playing in the mud, beauty standing on its head, and motherhood dragging a doll by the foot. Girls are available in 5 colors: black, white, red, yellow, and brown. But somehow Mother Nature always seems to know your favorite color whenever you place your order. They disprove the law of supply and demand, for there are millions of little girls, and yet each one is as precious as rubies. God borrowed from many strange creatures to create a little girl. He took the song of a bird, the squeal of a pig, the stubbornness of a mule, the antics of a monkey, the spryness of a grasshopper, the curiosity of a cat, the slyness of a fox, and the softness of a kitten. And then he added the mysterious mind of a woman. Little girls like new shoes, party dresses, noise-making, the girl next door, ice cream, coloring books, dancing lessons, kitchens, cans of water, and one boy. She dislikes visitors, boys in general, large dogs, hand-me-downs, vegetables, or staying in the front garden. She's the noisiest when you're thinking, the prettiest when she has provoked you, and the quietest when you want to show her off. She's the busiest at bedtime, the most flirtatious when she has annoyed you and must not get the better of you again. Who else could cause you more grief, joy, irritation, satisfaction, embarrassment, and genuine delight than this combination of Eve, Salome, and Florence Nightingale? She can mess up your home, your hair, and your dignity, spend your time, your money, and your temper. And just when your patience is ready to crack, her sunshine peeps through and you've lost again. She is a nerve-wracking nuisance, just a noisy bundle of mischief. But when your dreams tumble down and the world is a mess and you seem pretty much of a fool, she can make you a king. When she climbs on your knee, her arms around your neck and whispers, Dad, I love you best of all. No, you see, we have a big traffic problem in Dublin. The one-way streets, they're changing them every day. Honest to God, we don't know where we are. It's an accident if you get home. And Grafton Street is the most important one-way in this town. And this woman decides to drive up Grafton Street. And this big cop said, stop! And don't move as well. He said, where do you think you're going? She said, I don't know, but I must be late. Everybody coming back. yes. Two nuns went shopping to a big supermarket here in Dublin, and they were driving in a red mini car. When they got there, they couldn't find a place to park. One nun said to the other, "You go in and get the groceries, and I'll keep driving around till you come out." And she did that. She went in, got the groceries, came out, couldn't find the nun or the car. There's a man standing at the corner, and she walked up to him and said, "Excuse me, have you seen a nun in a red mini?" And he said, "Not since I took the pledge." I love it. Write it down. Well, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I have been here at juries for many years, and during that time it's been my privilege to meet people from all over the world. Many things fascinate people about Ireland. They like the people, the 40 shades of green, and the weather. You've been lucky with the weather. It's not always this good. Believe me. 4 months ago, a man came from Los Angeles to Dublin for rheumatism. He got it in 2 days. But we're different. It's nice to wake up in the morning and open the window and listen to the birds coughing. It really is. It's very nice. People are fascinated by many things about Ireland, but you know what they really enjoy? They really enjoy listening to the way we talk. You see, the Irish, we are unique when we talk because we say things that aren't necessary, and people find it very amusing. What do we mean by unnecessary remarks? Well, you could live here all your life and your neighbour live beside you, and they'll still greet you in the morning, something like this: "Good day to you. Is that yourself?" I mean, who else, for God's sake? Come on. Or sometimes you're walking down the street and somebody recognises you and they say, "Ha ha, there you are." I love that one. That's a brilliant deduction, that is. I was sitting at that table last night after the show, and a man from Galway recognised me, and he walked up to me and he said, "Excuse me," he said, "have you not gone home yet?" And him looking at me, sitting at the... But we do talk like that. 3 weeks ago, I was standing at a bus stop in Dublin. There was 25 of us standing at the bus stop. We were waiting for the bus at the time. So I just said it myself, yes. And this fella walked up to me and he said, "Do you know what I'm going to tell you?" No way. He said, "If we all get on this bus, there'll be about half of us left behind." There was this fella with one eye called Casey. I don't know what his other eye was called, but... Oh, dear God. Anyway, he's driving this big truck down in County Kerry, and in Ireland we have these rather low railway bridges, and he's driving the truck under the bridge and he jams it stuck fast. He can't move it. And this big cop comes along, stands watching him for a half an hour, trying to move it. And eventually the cop said to him in eloquent brilliance, he said, "Are you stuck?" And Casey said, "No, I was delivering the bridge and I lost the address." Write it down. But you know, ladies and gentlemen, I love children. I adore children. I used to go to school with them, and a long time ago, I've just written a book about kids. They fascinate me. This little Catholic boy said to this little Jewish boy, "Our parish priest knows much more than your rabbi." And the Jewish kid said, "Of course he does, because you tell him everything." There's a little boy at school down in County Kerry during the geographica lesson, and the teacher said, "Son, what's a Hindu?" And the child said, "It lays eggs." Hindu. Do you get it? Thank God for that. Anyway, this little boy said to his daddy one morning in the kitchen, he said, "Daddy, where's the Taj Mahal?" And the father said, "Ask your mother, she puts everything away in this house." The teacher said to this child, she said, "Son, what's the difference between 67,229 and 48,522? And the child said, "That's what I say too. What's the difference?" I mean, doesn't matter. But this is my favourite child's story. I've been telling this story for years. I love it. It was the geographica lesson, and she said to this child, she said, "Now, son, here's the question." She said, "Who knocked down the walls of Jericho?" And the child said, "Well, it wasn't me." Well, of course, the teacher was amazed at such a ridiculous answer.
And the next day she met the child's mother out shopping, and she said, I'm rather worried about your son because at school I asked him who knocked down the walls of Jericho, and he said it wasn't him. And the mother said, if my child said he didn't knock that wall down, he didn't do it. Well, of course, the teacher was stunned, and the next day she went to visit the child's father in their home. He was lying in bed at the time looking for work. Well, work is a very delicate subject in Ireland, do you know that? Half of the men in Ireland think manual labour is the Spanish ambassador. Anyway, she said to the father, I'm very worried about your son because at school I asked him who knocked down the walls of Jericho, and he said it wasn't him. And then I told your wife what happened, and she said, if my child said he didn't knock that wall down, he didn't do it. And the father said, well, I don't want any trouble. How much did this wall cost? But you know, I'm an avid fisherman. I love fishing. Recently in Waterford, where I come from, I went down there to fish. Now, there's always one genius in every village that knows where the big ones are, isn't that right? It's true, so I met him. He said, I'll show you where they are. So he brings me along. He said, now here we have them in the thousands, salmon, that size. Huge, he said. You don't even need a fishing rod. They're so plentiful, you can lean over into the water and pull them out with your bare hands. I said, you're kidding. He said, I'll show you. So we go along, and there it is, and there's a little bridge. Now I said, lean over the bridge, and I lower you down by the legs, and you can pull one up. I must have been out of my Chinese mind, you know that. I leaned over the bridge, he lowered me down by the legs. I panicked, I got hysterical. I said, for God's sake, get me up quick. He said, did you get one? I said, no, there's a train coming. I was in a bar the other night, the door burst open, and this little fella came in visibly agitated, and he was annoyed as well. He looked around the bar and he said, I want to know who painted my donkey green outside the door. And this big fella like John Wayne stood up and said, I did. What about it? And the little fella said, I just wanted to tell you that the first coat is dry. We had a Scotsman here last night, by the way, sitting at that table. And I said, what are you doing in Dublin? He said, I'm here on my honeymoon. But he was alone. So I said, where's your wife? He said, she's back in Scotland. She's been to Dublin before. I want to tell you a story. There was this old man, you see, and he lived alone, and he was very deaf, and he couldn't hear as well. And he had a parrot inside the front door on a perch, and this parrot was a marvellous talker, you see, fantastic. And one night, the old man went to bed. Of course, he went to bed every night, but this was a special night. And the next morning, the milkman arrived at the door, and he knocked at the door, and the parrot inside the door said, who is it? And the fellow said, it's the milkman. And the parrot said, who is it? He said, it's the milkman. And the parrot said, who is it? He said, it's the milkman. And the parrot said, who is it? He said, it's the milkman. And the parrot said, who is it? He said, it's the milkman. I hope to God I remember the ending of this. Anyway, the parrot said, who is it? He said, it's the milkman. Well, anyway, this went on for about an hour and a half. I won't bore you with the details. And eventually, after an hour and a half, the milkman passed out with exhaustion on outside the door, answering this thing back. And just then, the old man upstairs thought he heard something, you see, and he came down, and he opened the door, and he said, who is it? And the parrot said, it's the milkman. You know, I watch people coming out of bars at night in Ireland when they close. It's a psychological study to watch them. They're all beginning to walk like this with the head up. Not to spill any. Honest to God. I was in a bar the other night. I'm in a bar every night, but not to worry. And there's a new clinic, you see, just opened in Dublin for alcoholics. It's a closed shop. You can't get into it. It's true. But this clinic is different. The doctors and nurses drink all day with the patients. We don't get many cures, but the days just fly by, you know that. It's fantastic. Anyway, in this bar, there was two fellas sitting at the bar beside me discussing the potency of whiskey. One said Scotch whiskey was stronger than Irish whiskey. His friend said, no way. said, Irish whiskey is dynamite. He said, last week my wife and I drank a bottle of Irish whiskey. We went to bed, got up the next morning and went to 7 o'clock mass. His friend said, what's unusual about that? Lots of people drink a bottle of Irish whiskey and go to mass the next day. His friend said, I know, but we're Jewish. Seems to be in the news today, isn't it? It seems to be the big topic of conversation. And you know, the government here have men going around Ireland today to deter people from smoking. And one of these government officials, you see, finished up in the heart of Donegal, and he saw this farmer in a field and a cigarette hanging out of the side of his mouth. And the fella said from the health office, he said, now you know, he said, you shouldn't smoke because it's very bad for your health. So the farmer said to him, let me tell you something, he said. My father smoked 100 cigarettes a day, and he said he lived to be 103 years old. And he said then he died. And he said when he was dead 4 weeks, he said they dug him up, and he looked better than you do now. Recently I was on a train going down from Dublin to Killarney, and I got talking to a man from Kerry, a lovely old gentleman, and we were sitting in the dining car having a cup of tea. There's an American woman sitting opposite. She's got a little dog on the chair beside her. This American man comes in and said to her, Madam, would you like to remove the dog? I'd like to eat. She said, no way. The dog stays. I paid its fare. It's not moving for you or anybody else. Just then the American man picked up the dog and threw it out the window. And the fellow from Kerry said to me, I don't understand the Americans, he said, at all. They drive on the wrong side of the road. He said they eat their meat with a fork in the right hand. And he said, just now that man threw the wrong bitch out the window. Write it down. Tonight we have a mayor in from America. As a tribute to him, I would like to tear a replica of the Dublin Lord Mayor's chain from this piece of paper. The other day, I wasn't feeling too well. I went to see the doctor. I was sitting in the doctor's waiting room reading these magazines they have on the table. And I remember, by the way, wasn't it dreadful about the Titanic? This doctor was a funny man. I wish I were. But listen, I stopped smoking. I quit. I didn't have much choice. You see, the doctor took a couple of pictures of my chest. He said if you continue to smoke, I wouldn't advise you to buy any long-playing records. When they put it like that, you listen. He said, raise your right leg. And I did. He said, hold it up high. And I did. Now he said, leave it there. And I did. Now he said, I want you to raise your left leg. And I did. I fell flat on my back. He said, how long have you had these dizzy spells? There was this farmer, his wife, and his daughter, and they lived in this little farm in the heart of Donegal. And they were falling on hard times. Times were very, very bad, and they had one cow. And they decided they'd have to sell the cow. So the next morning, the father and the daughter got up, and they yoked up the ass and cart, and tied the cow at the back, and off they went to the fair, and they sold the cow for £60. And on the way back, they were held up by robbers, you see, and the robbers took everything and left the two of them standing in the middle of the road. And when they were gone, the father said to his daughter, my God, he said, what are we going to do now? How are we going to tell your mother? He said, we lost the cow, we lost the money, and we lost the ass and cart, you see. And the daughter said, Father, they didn't get the money, she said. He said, what do you mean? She said, I hid it. I hid it. And he said, where did you hide it? And she said, I hid it in me mouth. And the father said, my God, isn't it a pity your mother wasn't here? We'd have saved the ass and cart as well. But do you ever... You know what fascinates me, by the way? You know these newspaper ads, you know, the matrimonial column, where the women are looking for the husbands and the men are looking for the wives, and they put an ad in the paper. Do you ever read them? Oh, they're very funny, some of them. This is one here I'm going to read to you now in the Donegal newspaper, and it goes something like this. It says, man with 10-ton truck would like to meet respectable woman with 2 good tires. with view to matrimony. P.S. Please send recent photograph of the tires. Well, there you are. It's all there. There was this fellow working in Dublin here in Guinness's in the huge big vat, the huge big whiskey vat, and one day he fell into it. 3 of his mates dived in to try and save him, but he fought them off. And And of course he was drowned. On the death certificate it read, cause of death, ecstasy. And then he was cremated. It took 3 weeks to put the fire out. The other day, and he went to a fish shop in Dublin, and he said to the man, I'd like some plaice and chips. And the fella said, we don't sell it, we only have cod, we've no plaice. But he said, I don't want cod, I want plaice. And the fishman said, we haven't got it. But he said, it says in the window, plaice. And the fishman said, I know, but we haven't got it, we only have cod. Well, the fella says, I won't go out without it. I want the plaice. So the fishman said, listen, he said, I'll put it to you this way. He said, if you took the S out of skate, what would you have? The fella said, Kate. He said, if you took the C out of cod, what would you have? And the fella said, odd. He said, if you took the flip out of place, what would you have? And the fella said, there's no flip in place. He said, that's what I'm trying to tell you. They've just opened a new posh barber shop here in Dublin. Very exclusive and very, very expensive. And O'Reilly, by the way, won a few pounds at the races and he decided to pamper himself. He's sitting in the chair, 6 people looking after him and a fine, good-looking woman giving him a manicure. And he said to her, would you like to come out with me tonight? We'll go out in the town, we'll enjoy ourselves, a bottle of wine, and we'll have a nice dinner, and we'll go dancing, and we'll have a great time. And she said, I'm married. He said, that doesn't matter. You can tell your husband you're going out with your girlfriend. She said, you can tell him yourself, he's shaving you. I wish I could be out there with you, I really do. Murphy and the wife got married, and he said to her, let's keep our marriage a secret. And she said, but supposing we have a baby? Oh, he said, we'll tell the baby, of course. God, I'm in fierce form today, I really am. 2 women talking in the village, and one said, Joanna, she said, do you mean to tell me you never loved your husband at all, at all? She said, no, I never loved him, no. Her friend said, why did you have 24 children for him? She said, well, I tried to lose him in the crowd. 2 women talking in the village, and one said to the other one, she said, 8 years ago my husband made me a very happy woman. He brought a little magic into our marriage. He disappeared. The things they say. Casey and Flanagan were talking in the bar, and Casey said to Flanagan, my wife is an angel. And Flanagan said, you're lucky, mine is still living. Murphy and the wife are having a row. She said to him, before we were married, you told me you were well off. He said, I was, and I didn't know it. This fellow Flanagan is dashing to catch the ferry boat in Dublin. And we got to the quayside. The ferry boat is about 20 feet out from the dock. And he decided to take a chance. He took a run and he jumped 20 feet and landed on the deck. And there's a deckhand standing beside him, and he said to him, my God, he said, I just made it. And the deckhand said, you shouldn't have bothered, this boat is coming in. There's an old couple, by the way, 85 years old, ladies and gentlemen. And one night they're sitting at the fire and they're watching television. And the wife said to the husband, she said, Sean, will you go to the kitchen and get me some ice cream? But she said, I know your memory is gone, so I'll write it down for you. He said, you don't have to, Mary Kate. You want some ice cream? I'll get it for you. And she said, by the way, will you pour a little chocolate on the top of it? But in the name of God, I'll write it down for you because you won't remember. He said, you want ice cream and a little chocolate? I'll get it for you. I said, will you sprinkle a couple of nuts on the top of that? But I'll write it down for you. He said, Mary Kate, you don't have to write it down. You want ice cream, chocolate and nuts, and I'll get it for you. He went into the kitchen. 20 minutes later, he came back with a tray with bacon and eggs on the tray. And she looked at it and said, I knew I should have written it down for you. He said, what's wrong? She said, you forgot the toast. I met Casey the other day looking very despondent and very upset. I said, Casey, what's wrong? He said, I've been swindled out of £500 by Muldoon. I said, what happened? He said, I loaned Muldoon £500 to plastic surgery done to his face. And now he said, I don't even know what he looks like. Murphy went to the doctor. The doctor examined him and gave him 2 weeks to live. Murphy said, I'll have the first week in June and the last week in September. I wanted to paint a little picture for you for the next one now. It's 11 o'clock in the morning, Hennessy's pub. Doolan is standing outside the pub with a thirst you could photograph. And a hangover that would kill a horse. And no money. Dying he is, dying with the droot, as they say at home, dying with the droot. Just then, Cassidy's funeral went by and the hearse was going very fast. It hit a bump in the road and the back door flew open and Cassidy fell out onto the ground. Doolan picked him up and carried him into Hennessy's pub, put him lying across the bar. He called Hennessy out from the parlour. He said, Hennessy, come out! We'll have 2 large whiskies, the 2 of us. Hennessy set him up and he drank them. He said, don't go away, we'll have 2 more large whiskies. Hennessy set him up and he drank those. And Hennessy said, that'll be £8 if you please. And Doolan said, my friend here will pay for them. And he went, yes. And he went into the men's room. And Hennessy said to your man, that'll be £8, please. Not a word out of him. 15 minutes he was talking to himself. And then he got annoyed and he shook him. He said, come on, £8. And your man slid off the bar onto the floor. Just then Doolan came out of the men's room, looked down, pretended to be shocked. He said, my God, Hennessy, he said, you've killed my best friend. And Hennessy said, I had to. He pulled a knife on me. Flanagan was courting the widow Quinn for 11 years. My dear people, let me try in my own inadequate way to describe to you all the widow Quinn. A wild woman from the hills of County Kerry with a figure like 6 miles of bad road. An ugly woman, God help us. When she went to the zoo, she had to have 2 tickets, one to get in and one to get out. She's explaining again here. God help us, there's none of us perfect, none of us. The widow, she had long red hair all down her back, none on her head. Big woman, big. Have you got the picture of the widow? One night, Flanagan took the widow home to meet his 90-year-old father in the little thatched cottage in the mountain. When the old man saw the widow Quinn, he took a turn. And he went into a weakness. My mother used to say that. If somebody fainted at mass, she'd come home and say they took a turn and they went into a weakness. Well, that's what happened to the old man when he saw the widow. And he called Flanagan aside and he whispered to him. He said, in the name of God, where did you find her? No teeth, cross-eyed, bow-legged, knock-kneed. Flanagan said, there's no need to whisper, she's deaf as well. But I come from Waterford, Portlarig, digging to beautiful, lovely, lovely Waterford. Now, ladies and gentlemen, my father, whose name evades me now for the moment. This is ridiculous. I know the man. Happy birthday to you. Oh, Dad. Anyway, my father, what a man. Very superstitious. He would never work any week that had a Friday in it. And could he drink? He joined the Alcoholics Anonymous. Mind you, he still drinks, but now under a different name. Oh, dear God. My mother heard him staggering up the stairs at 4 o'clock in the morning, making all sorts of noise and racket. She was annoyed. She called down from the bedroom. She said, what time is this to be coming in? What's all the noise about? 4 o'clock in the morning? And he said, Mary Kate, I'm trying to get a barrel of Guinness up the stairs. She said, leave it till morning. He said, I can't. I drank it. Write it down. Good one. 22 children in the family, and he had no favorites. He hated all of us. But you know, ladies and gentlemen, some of the happiest times in my life are spent in the company of children. No man is so tall as when he bends to help a child. I've always said that. I guess I always will. The beauty of them, the innocence of them. I wrote a book called Laugh with the Children of Ireland. Of course, in all my work, you'll hear me constantly referring to the humour of the children back home. Lovely stuff. Here's a couple of clips. Little boy at school in the village, and the teacher said, Sean, what's a cannibal? He said, I don't know. And the teacher said, if you were to eat your mother and father, what would you be? He said, an orphan. Little Mary Kate, 5 years old, by the way, the old aunt was visiting the family home for tea. And when tea is over, little Mary Kate walked up and said, Auntie, when are you going to do your trick? The aunt said, what trick? And the child said, my dad said you drink like a fish. Little boy at school, English history lesson. The teacher said, Seamus, where was Anne Boleyn beheaded? He said, below the chin. She said to this little boy, name 2 days of the week beginning with the letter T. He said, today and tomorrow. This little boy said to his daddy one day, he said, Daddy, is it true that we come from dust and to dust we shall return? And the father said, that's true, me boy. Why do you ask? And the kid said, well, you'd better look under my bed. There's somebody there either coming or going. The innocence of them, the things that they say. The teacher said to this little boy, she said, if I lay 4 eggs there and I lay 10 eggs over there, how many eggs would I have altogether? And the boy said, I don't believe you can do it. It was the religious lesson at school. And the teacher said to all the children, she said, if God were to walk into the classroom right now, what would you say? What would you do? What would you say to him? And this little girl said, well, I'd surprise him. I'd walk up to him and I'd tap him on the shoulder, and when he turned around quickly, I'd hand him the Bible and I'd say, God, this is your life. I love it, I love it, I love it. There was a drawing class, and the teacher said to the children now, she said, I want you to draw a picture for me depicting the flight into Egypt. And this little girl drew a picture of 3 people and a black spot. And she said to the child, who are the 3 people in the picture? And the little girl said, that's Joseph, Mary, and the baby. And the teacher said, that's nice. What's the black spot? And the girl said, that's a flea. And the teacher said, a flea? What's a flea got to do with it? And the little girl said, well, the angel said to Joseph, take Mary and the child and flee into Egypt. You got to write that down. It's a classic. It really is. The little boy beside her drew a picture of an airplane with 3 people sitting in the back of the plane and 1 man sitting up front. And the teacher said, who are the 3 people in the airplane? And the boy said, that's Joseph, Mary, and the child. And the teacher said, who's the man sitting up at the front of the airplane? And he said, that's Pontius, the pilot. You know, when they're confirming the boys, the bishop, it is customary to ask them questions related to religion. Isn't that right? That's right, Father. True. And she said, the bishop said to this boy, give me your definition of the Blessed Trinity. And the boy said, 1 in 3 and 3 in 1. And the bishop said, I don't understand. The boy said, "You're not supposed to understand. It's a mystery." They were having a lesson on India, and the teacher said to this boy, "What's Gandhi's first name?" He said, "Goosey Goosey." Write it down. Good one. She said to this boy, "Who in Greek mythology was half man, half animal?" And the kid said, "Buffalo Bill." Laugh at ourselves. Mrs. Hennessy went into her son's bedroom at 7 o'clock in the morning to call him to get up to go to school. She said, "Timothy, 'tis time to get up to go to school." And Timothy said, "I don't want to go to school. I hate school." He said, "All the kids hate me. All the cleaners in the school hate me. All the teachers hate me. I don't want to go to school." His mother said, "You've got to go to school. You're 40 years old and you're the principal." You know, I'm fascinated by these Godfather films, by the way. I really am. And I want to tell you a story about a Godfather. Could be anywhere. So the Godfather sent for his men one day and he said, "We got a problem. The accountant can't account for $3 million, so we had him taken care of this morning at 9 o'clock. He's a memory, gone." He said, "Now we need a new one. We need a new accountant, but we need one who don't talk too much and don't hear too much." And his head man, Louis, said, "I know just the man, the best accountant in the world, and he don't hear and he don't talk." So the Godfather said, "How do we communicate with this man?" And Louis said, "I know the sign thing, the sign business." And the Godfather said, "Well, we get him." So they get him, and 3 weeks go by, and there's $5 million missing. So they bring him in, and the Godfather put the gun on the table, and he said to Louis, "Ask him what he did with the $5 million. And Louis did the sign thing like this. Did all the signs, you see, like that. All the signs. And the fella answered back with all the signs. And the Godfather said to Louis, "What did he say?" And Louis said, "He said he's not talking." Not talking. Tell you nothing. So the Godfather put the gun on the table and he said to Louis, "Ask him one more time and tell him if he don't tell us what he did with the $5 million, I'm going to blow his head off." So Louis looked at the guy again and did the sign language with the hand. And the fella began to tremble and he started to answer in the sign language, "Okay, I'll talk. I hid the $5 million under the rose bush at the bottom of my garden." And the Godfather said to Louis, "What did he say?" Louis said, "He says you're nothing but a big fat bum." And you haven't got the guts to shoot him. I went to the doctor last week and your father came with me. The doctor put a small tube into my mouth and told me not to talk for 10 minutes. Your father offered to buy it from him. You're lovely, you're lovely, you're lovely. You know, ladies and gentlemen, humor is so uplifting to all of us. We need it like the very air we breathe. We don't laugh enough these days. The world is in pain. Laughter can help us cope. There's no doubt about that at all. This fella Casey back home, by the way, he breeds dogs. He crossed a pit bull with a Saint Bernard. And this dog attacks you and then goes for help. But you know, it's funny that today we live in a world where there are little fears in cities. And it's all over the world. It's just in America, but it's everywhere. I was in London recently, by the way, tough town, London. Oh, yes. I passed a convent there called Our Lady of Ammunition. I phoned Dial a Prayer. They told me to go to hell. In my room, by the way, in my room, there's a Bible, and I opened the Bible, and it's written, it says, "If you're an alcoholic, phone this number." And I did. It was a liquor store. Mrs. Doolan was pushing a new baby in a stroller in the supermarket. An elderly woman stopped to admire the child. She said, "What a beautiful baby. What beautiful red hair. Does his father have red hair?" She said, "I don't know. He never took his cap off." Flanagan, he was drinking all day in Hennessy's pub, about 5 or 6 hours drinking, and he was, he was pretty drunk. And then he said to Hennessy, the bartender, "I'll have another large whiskey." And Hennessy said, "You can't. You're drunk." He said, "I'm not drunk." "I'm telling you," he said, "you're drunk." He said, "I am not drunk, and I will prove it to you." He said, "You see that cat coming in the door? That cat has only one eye." And Hennessy said, "I told you were drunk. That cat is going out." Flanagan told me he came home early last Friday and walked into the bedroom, and there was Gilhooly with his wife. I said, "What did you do?" He said, "Nothing. I went into the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea." I said, "What about Gilhooly?" He said, "He can make his own tea." Oh, dear God. Every night Casey went to Hennessy's pub and always had 2 pints of Guinness before going home. This night he came in as usual and called for his pint. The bar owner, Murphy, says, "Your pint is paid for." Casey says nothing and sits down. Then he goes up to the bar to get another pint, and Murphy says, "That's paid for too." Casey says, "Who's buying me all this beer?" And Murphy says, "Do you see that man over there sitting in the corner with a beard? He says he went to school with you." Casey said, "Well, he's a liar. I never went to school with anyone with a beard." Tim Flanagan, who hadn't lived a very good life, passed away. At the funeral, Father O'Shea gave a wonderful tribute to him, telling us all what a fine, good husband and father he was, and that he was a credit to the community. After listening to all this, his wife leaned over to her daughter and whispered, "Go over there and see if that's your father in the coffin." There's a sign outside a hospital in County Cork. It says, "Guard dogs operating here." Danaher took his boss and his wife home for supper, and his daughter Mary Kate was asked to set the table. When they came to eat, Mrs. Danaher said to Mary Kate, "Why don't you give Mrs. Casey a fork and knife?" She said, "She won't need one. Me dad says she eats like a horse." Flanagan and his son came out of the pet shop, and the boy was carrying a covered box. They got on the bus to go home, and his son said, "Dad, is my kitten a man kitten or a lady kitten?" His father said, "It's a man kitten." He said, "How do you know?" And everybody in the bus heaved a sigh of relief when he said, "It's a man kitten because it has whiskers." Oh, dear God. Kid said, "Granddad, when are you going to do your frog impression?" And he said, "I don't do frog impressions." She said, "Well, Mum said when you croak, we'll all be rich." Doolan was driving home at night and he was swerving all over the road. A policeman stopped him and said, "Have you alcohol taken?" And Casey said, I've had 6 whiskies, 2 brandies and 6 pints of Guinness." And the cop said, "I'll have to breathalyze you." He said, "Why? Don't you believe me?" Write it down. A tramp accosted Doolan, a wealthy farmer, and asked for the price of a cup of tea. And Doolan, a generous man, offered to buy him a glass of whiskey. Instead, the tramp said, "I don't drink, sir." Doolan said, "Well, take one of my cigars." And the tramp said, "I don't smoke." Doolan said, "Okay, here's £10. Go and back a horse." The tramp said, "I don't gamble either. I just want a cup of tea." And Doolan said, "Right, come home with me now and meet my wife. I wanted to see what happens to a man who doesn't drink, gamble or smoke." Doolan won a gold medal in the Olympics, and he was so thrilled he had it bronzed. Murphy came to my house some time ago. Both his knees were bandaged from the ankles up to the knees. I said, "What happened to you?" He said, "I was having soup for lunch, and the directions said, open can and stand in boiling water." Murphy, by the way, you know we have the lottery in Ireland now. We have the lottery. Oh, yes. And Murphy won £100,000 in the lottery. And he's from Dublin, and he's a commercial traveller, and he's down in Limerick. And he heard on the radio he had won, millions on the lottery. And he was thrilled. And he phoned his wife and he said, "Mary Kate, wonderful news. We've won the lottery. Pack your bags." And she said, "Shall I pack them for the summer or the winter?" And he said, "It doesn't matter as long as you're gone when I get back." I'm driving to the races one day. There's a fella driving in front of me, and the taillight of his car is on the blink. When I got close to him, I called out to him. I said, "Pull over! You got a problem." He pulled over. He got out of the car and said, "What is it?" I said, "Your taillight's on the blink." He went round the back of his car. The man got hysterical. He said, "Good God, I'm ruined. What am I going to do? My life is over. My God, my wife, my children, what am I going to do?" I said, "Relax, it's only a taillight." He said, "To hell with the taillight. Where's my trailer?" Casey and Flanagan were talking about wars, and Casey said, "My grandfather was killed in the war." Well, he wasn't exactly fighting in the war. He was camping in a field beside where the fighting was going on. And he went in to complain about the noise. Write it down. For God's sake, write it down. Write it down, you may forget it, write it down. If that happens, you'll regret it, write it down. If you've had a real good time and a drop of vintage wine and the Irish jokes were fine, so write it down. Write it down, write it down, write it down. It's nice to see you smile, write it down. And when laughter fills the air, don't you make it all so rare. Life is better when you care, so write it down. If you're driving home tonight, write it down. Don't give anyone a fright, write it down. Don't go crazy in that car, and don't push the gas too far. Take a taxi if you just, so write it down. Write it down, write it down, write it down. It's nice to see you smile, write it down. And when laughter fills the air, don't you make it all so rare. Life is better when you care, so write it down. Now it's time to say goodnight, write it down. Thank you for being so bright, I'll write it down. Though fate may push and shove you, by the Lord who reigns above you, this is how I really love you, write it down. Write it down, write it down, write it down. It's nice to see you smile, write it down. And when laughter fills the air, don't you make it all so rare. Life is better when you care, so write it down. Life is better when you care, so write it down.